A forgotten crown holds the fate of ancient kingdoms. In the quiet village of Oakhaven, young Alara opens her grandmother's old chest and finds something extraordinary inside. It is a tarnished crown, dull with age, yet its 7 gemstones pulse with a faint, mysterious light. Driven by pure curiosity, she places it on her head, unaware that this simple act awakens a long-dormant magic. The first gem flickers to life, and a whisper of forgotten legends stirs in the wind. By the end of this story, you will discover how one girl's courage restored balance to entire realms. What ancient magic sleeps within the objects we overlook, just waiting for the right person to find it. I would love to know where in the world you are listening from right now, and what the local time is there. What do you believe is the true source of a hero's strength? The crown's pull was a soft, insistent hum against Alara's brow, a thread of light only she could see drawing her toward the edge of the whispering woods. The trees stood like ancient sentinels, their leaves murmuring secrets in a language just beyond understanding. With a deep breath, she stepped from the familiar sunshine into the dappled, shifting shadows. The path behind her seemed to melt away almost instantly, replaced by a labyrinth of gnarled roots and hanging moss. Every whisper seemed to question her presence. Why are you here, little one? Do you have the heart for what lies ahead? Her own uncertainty was a cold stone in her chest, but she focused on the warm pulse of the first crown, a steady beacon in the unsettling quiet. She did not run or turn back. Instead, she listened, not just with her ears, but with her entire being, to the subtle guidance of the magic she now carried. To move forward, she had to understand the woods themselves. A great oak, its bark carved with symbols that swam before her eyes, blocked the way. The whispers coalesced into a clear, gentle voice that seemed to come from the tree itself. It did not ask for a feat of strength, but a riddle of the heart. What is it that you must give to truly possess, and what must you lose to truly find? Alara thought of her grandmother's stories, of courage and letting go. She thought of the weight of the crown and the quiet of the kingdoms it represented. Her answer was a soft whisper. You must give your trust to possess loyalty. You must lose your way to find your purpose. A deep, resonant hum answered her, and the great oak's roots shifted, sinking into the earth to reveal a new path, opening into a sun-drenched glade. There, in the very center, a second crown rested upon a simple stone pedestal, woven with living vines. It was simpler than the first, crafted of pale, polished wood and silver that gleamed like captured moonlight. As her fingers brushed its cool surface, a wave of pure, vibrant life energy flowed through her. The 2 crowns on her head seemed to harmonize, their magic intertwining into a stronger, more complex melody. But the moment the second crown was claimed, the glade itself awoke. The surrounding trees seemed to lean in, their bark shifting to reveal faces of wise, old guardians. They did not speak with anger, but with the immense weight of ages. You carry the hope of those who came before, child. This is not a treasure hunt. It is a restoration. With this power comes a duty to heal what was broken. The weight of their words settled upon Alara more heavily than the crowns themselves. She was no longer just a curious girl from a small village. She was a keeper of a legacy, and the journey had only just begun. What other trials awaited in the silent mountains or the sun-scorched deserts, and was her newfound courage enough to face them? The light around Alara shifted as the guardians stepped from the very fabric of the woods. They were not solid, but forms of shimmering gold and deep, shifting shadow, their presence humming with the ancient power of the forest itself. Their voices were not a sound, but a feeling that pressed directly upon her mind, a wave of pure authority. The crowns do not belong to the world of the living. You have disturbed a sacred rest. Return them to their slumber, or be swept away with the fallen leaves. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird in a cage of bone. Every instinct screamed to run, to clutch the crowns and flee back toward the fading memory of sunlight. But to run would be to prove their point, that she was a thief, unworthy of the trust the magic had placed in her. She forced her feet to remain rooted, her hands to stay open and empty at her sides. She made a different choice, a harder one. She chose to speak. "I did not come to steal," she said, her voice small but clear in the charged air. "I came because the crowns called to me. The realms are out of balance. The silence is a wound. I want to help them remember their song." The ethereal forms stilled, their judgmental pressure easing into a palpable curiosity. "You speak of restoration, not power, a rare intent." One of the beings, a figure of woven light and bark, drifted closer. Its gaze felt like it was reading the story written on her soul. "The wraiths of the deep shadow have already felt the awakening. They hunger for the light you carry. They will hunt you, little keeper, for the crowns you bear are the only keys that can lock them away forever. Your path is no longer just one of discovery, but of survival." With these solemn words, the guardians did not vanish, but instead dissolved into the air around her, their essence becoming a subtle, guiding warmth at her back. The forest path, once merely mysterious, now felt watchful and fraught with new peril. Each rustle of leaves could be a harmless creature, or the approach of a formless hunter, drawn to the very magic that lit her way. The weight of the crowns was no longer just the weight of legacy, but the weight of a purpose, placed squarely upon her shoulders. How far could her courage carry her when the shadows themselves began to move? A cold dread prickled the air before she saw them. The forest shadows did not just deepen, they detached, pulling away from the trees to form figures of swirling, silent darkness. The shadow wraiths were here. They moved without sound, their forms drinking the light, and their only goal was the faint pulse of the crowns on her head. Alara's breath caught. There was nowhere to run. Instinct took over. She focused all her will on the two crowns, feeling their energies intertwine. A brilliant, warm light burst from the gemstones, forming a shimmering dome around her just as the first wraith lunged. It recoiled from the barrier with a silent, furious ripple, but more were gathering, pressing in from all sides. Holding the light was like trying to hold back a tide. Each moment drained her, leaving her limbs trembling and her mind foggy. She could not hold this forever. With a final surge of effort, she pushed the light outward in a blinding flash, giving herself a precious few seconds to run. But which way? Back toward Oak Haven, toward home and safety. The thought was a sweet, powerful pull, but bringing these hunters to her village, to her family. The choice was instant and clear. She turned and ran deeper into the unknown, leading the wraiths away from everything she loved. It was a choice that settled in her bones, a quiet certainty that seemed to resonate with the crowns themselves. They hummed in approval, their connection to her deepening from mere possession to a true, shared purpose. She scrambled up rocky slopes, her lungs burning, the whispers of the Wraiths, a chilling presence at her back. Reaching a high ridge, she finally risked a look back. The dark forms were still flowing through the trees below, patient and relentless. They would not give up. Her flight was not over. It had only just begun, and the path ahead led into lands where the very stones held secrets, and the winds told tales of the other crowns. The whispering woods finally gave way to a landscape of stark, silent beauty. Before her stretched the hills of echoing stones, a vast expanse of smooth, gray rock, where every footfall, every breath, seemed to ripple outward and return to her amplified. It was a place of profound sound, and in her current situation, sound was a dangerous liability. She took a cautious step, and the clatter of a pebble she dislodged seemed to roar through the valleys, a beacon announcing her presence. Almost immediately, she felt the familiar chill, the subtle dimming of light as the shadow wraiths shifted their pursuit toward the new noise. To rush was to summon them. Her only path forward was one of absolute silence and cleverness. She had to learn the language of the hills themselves. She noticed that the stones did not merely echo, they answered. A low hum from one direction would be met with a higher, melodic chime from another. The hills were not just repeating sound, they were conversing. An idea, fragile but hopeful, began to form. If she could not be silent, perhaps she could be a part of their conversation. She focused, listening for the dominant notes in the stone's song, and then, tentatively, she hummed a matching tone. The response was immediate. A nearby stone glowed with a soft, internal light and emitted a pure, clear note that cascaded through the hills, a beautiful, distracting symphony. She repeated the process, creating a chorus of sound that did not originate from her movements. The pursuing chill seemed to hesitate, confused by the sudden orchestra of echoes that masked her true, careful path. Following the most resonant melody, she was led to a narrow crevice in the largest hill. Inside, the cavern was alive with sound, the walls humming with a stored, ancient song. And there, resting on a natural pedestal of crystal that pulsed in time with the music, was the third crown. It was wrought of a metal that looked like liquid bronze, and it was studded with stones that shimmered with captured light and vibration. As her fingers closed around it, the cavern fell utterly silent for one breathless moment, and then the three crowns on her head surged with a new, unified power. Their hum was no longer just a melody, but a palpable force, a current of energy that made the air around her crackle. It was a profound triumph, but it came at a cost. The massive, focused output of power to claim the crown had been a flare in the darkness. The hesitation of the Wraiths vanished, replaced by a swift, converging certainty. They were coming, and they were close. The three crowns hummed with a new, urgent rhythm, no longer just a guide, but a warning. The path ahead would be darker, and the need for the remaining crowns was now a race against the closing shadows. The cavern's profound silence was a weight all its own. Then the whispers began. They were not from the stones, but from the air itself, weaving into shapes of shimmering light and shadow. Before Alara stood a vision of Oakhaven, her home, but the sky above it was dark with the swirling forms of shadow wraiths. Her mother stood in the doorway of their cottage, her face etched with a concern Alara had never seen. calling her name in a heartfelt plea. Another whisper showed her grandmother, alone, the light fading from her eyes. The illusions felt more real than the stone beneath her feet, each one a sharp point of doubt aimed directly at her heart. "This is what your quest brings," the cavern seemed to murmur. "This is the consequence of your choice. Turn back now, and you can save them. Leave the crowns, and they will be safe." For a terrifying moment, the logic of it felt inescapable. Her love for her family was a physical ache, a powerful force urging her to drop the crowns and run home. But as she watched the vision of her weeping mother, a deeper truth surfaced through the fear. Her grandmother had not given her the key to that chest out of mere chance. She had entrusted her with a purpose. To turn back now would not save her family. It would only delay the coming shadow, ensuring it eventually reached Oakhaven's door without anyone left to stand against it. The true danger was not in continuing, but in surrendering. "These are not real," she said, her voice steadying as she spoke to the illusions. "You are a test. My love for them is my strength, not my weakness. It is the very reason I cannot turn back." With that affirmation, the visions of her family did not vanish in anger, but softened, their faces shifting from concern to pride, before dissolving into motes of gentle light. The cavern's oppressive energy lifted, replaced by a profound, peaceful stillness. The 3 crowns on her head flared with a warm, brilliant glow, their light so pure it pushed back the lingering shadows in the chamber, revealing the cavern's true form, a beautiful, crystalline grotto. The bond between Keeper and Crowns was no longer just one of shared purpose, but of shared spirit. Stepping out of the cavern mouth, the world seemed to have shifted. The oppressive dread of the Wraiths felt more distant, held at bay by her renewed resolve. And there, far across the plains, nestled against the slopes of a majestic mountain range, was a sight that stole her breath. A city of white stone and silver spires, glowing with a soft, ethereal light under the twilight sky. It was a place from her grandmother's oldest stories, a place she thought was only a legend. The next crown was there. She could feel its call harmonizing with the 3 she already carried, a quiet, persistent song on the wind. The greatest challenges were still ahead, but for the first time, the destination was not just a feeling, but a light on the horizon. The city of crystal spires rose before her, a breathtaking vision of white stone and towers that seemed spun from captured starlight. Its bridges, arching gracefully over misty chasms, were not built of wood or common stone, but of a single, continuous crystal that hummed with a soft, inner music. Yet as Alara drew nearer, her heart sank. The grandest bridge, the one that led to the city's heart, was fractured. A deep, jagged crack ran through its center, and the beautiful hum was now a discordant, pained whisper. The light within the crystal flickered weakly, like a fading heartbeat. Standing at the far end were figures robed in silver, their faces ancient and etched with a deep sorrow. These were the Starlight Sages, the silent guardians of this place. They watched her approach, their expressions not hostile, but profoundly weary, as if they had long given up hope of seeing the bridge whole again. One of the sages raised a hand, his voice as clear as the crystal itself. "The bridge will not hold your weight, Keeper. Its light has been failing for an age. You seek the crown it protects, but the path is broken." Alara looked from the sage's sad eyes to the fractured bridge. She felt the 3 crowns on her head, their combined energy a warm, steady pulse against her brow. The Wraiths were still out there, and every moment counted, yet the thought of simply asking for the crown and moving on felt deeply wrong. The city itself was wounded. How could she take its treasure without offering to heal its hurt first? "I did not come only to take," she said, her voice firm. "I came to restore. Please, let me try to help." Focusing her will, she directed the light of the 3 crowns toward the great crack. It was not a forceful blast, but a gentle, flowing radiance, like liquid sunlight. She poured the energy into the fracture, feeling the crystal's own faint song resonate with the magic she offered. It was a painstaking process, requiring immense concentration. She was not forcing the pieces back together, but encouraging them to remember their wholeness, to grow back into one another. The light from the crowns wove itself into the very structure of the bridge, stitching the fracture with threads of pure energy. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the crack began to seal. The discordant hum softened, then smoothed into a clear, rising chord. The bridge glowed from within, its light brighter and more beautiful than before. As the final seam of crystal fused, the Starlight sages bowed their heads in unison. The lead sage approached, his weariness replaced by a look of profound respect. "Your selflessness has done what our knowledge alone could not," he said. "You did not see a broken obstacle, but a living thing in need of mending. For that, you have earned more than passage." He gestured, and from the heart of the now glowing city, a 4th crown floated toward her. It was crafted of the same luminous crystal as the bridge, set with a single, perfect gem that shone with the cool, constant light of a distant star. As it settled beside the others, the 4 crowns sang in perfect harmony, their power now a tangible force that made the air around her shimmer. But the sage's expression grew solemn once more. "You have proven your heart is true," he warned. "Yet the trials ahead will not test your compassion, but the very core of your spirit. The next crowns are guarded by challenges of memory, of truth, and of letting go. The shadows you flee are gathering their strength. Do not linger." With those final words, the entire city seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Every spire, every crystal, shimmered with a collective, silent farewell. And as the light pulsed, a new path etched itself into the distant mountainside, a narrow trail leading upward into clouds that swirled with a strange, metallic sheen. The way forward was clear, but the sage's warning echoed in her mind, a cold counterpoint to the warm light of the 4 crowns now guiding her way. The path the sages revealed led Alara down from the mountains to the edge of a vast, still lake, its surface a perfect mirror for the bruised twilight sky. This was the entrance to the Sunken Grotto, and the call of the 5th crown was a deep, resonant pull from the watery depths below. For Alara, who had always been uneasy around deep water, this was a trial that gripped her with a cold, primal dread. She stood at the water's edge, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, but the 4 crowns pulsed on her head, a steady, warm rhythm that seemed to whisper of trust and necessity. Taking the deepest breath her lungs could hold, she stepped into the chilling embrace of the lake. The world above vanished into a muffled, blue silence. Yet as she sank deeper, the darkness was not absolute. Strange, glowing plants spiraled up from the lake bed, their soft light illuminating a path through towering forests of kelp. Schools of silvery fish, their scales reflecting the ethereal glow, darted around her, curious but not afraid. They swam in intricate patterns, almost as if they were guiding her forward. She followed their shimmering trail, pushing her body and her courage to their limits, until she saw it. In the very heart of the grotto, resting on a bed of luminous white sand, was a giant oyster. Its shell was open, and within it, cradled like a heart, was a pearl that shone with a gentle, unwavering light, and resting upon that pearl was the fifth crown. It was a delicate, flowing circlet of what looked like woven sea foam and mother of pearl, and it seemed to hum with the quiet, ancient song of the deep. Her lungs screamed for air, spots dancing at the edge of her vision. This was the final test. With a last, desperate kick, she reached out, and her fingers closed around the cool, smooth band. The moment she touched it, a surge of calm energy flowed through her, and the desperate need for air faded into a distant memory. The 5 crowns now sang a chorus of earth, forest, stone, star, and sea. But her triumph was short-lived. Kicking upward toward the fading light of the surface, she saw them, dark, shifting shapes, circle the grotto's entrance above, their silent forms blocking her only known way out. The Wraiths had found her. Panic threatened to seize her, but the new crown's energy, cool and adaptable like water itself, steadied her mind. She remembered the silvery fish and their intricate, guiding dance. They had not just been showing her the way in, they had been showing her the way out. Pushing away from the light above, she swam deeper into the grotto, toward a narrow, dark fissure in the rock wall that she had initially overlooked. It was a tight, terrifying squeeze, a rushing current pulling her through a pitch-black tunnel. She tumbled through the churning water, completely disoriented, until she was violently expelled into the calm, shallow waters of a hidden lagoon on the far side of the mountain. Gasping on her hands and knees in the cool night air, she was safe for now, but the 5 crowns on her head hummed with a new, urgent intensity. Their collective light was a beacon that could not be hidden for long, and the final 2 crowns awaited in places where the very fabric of reality was said to thin. The canyon walls pressed in, their dark stone absorbing the light of her 5 crowns, until only a faint glow illuminated the narrow path. It was a perfect place for an ambush, and the Wraiths did not disappoint. The air grew frigid, and from the stone itself, figures began to form. Not shadowy monsters this time, but heartbreakingly familiar faces. There stood her grandmother, her hand outstretched, her eyes pleading. "Alara, come home. It is not too late to leave this burden behind." Another figure shimmered into view, a childhood friend she had not seen in years, beckoning her toward a simpler, safer life. The illusions were flawless, weaving their words from her own deepest doubts and fondest memories. For a moment, her resolve wavered, the crown's hum faltering as her heart ached with the temptation. But then she remembered the Starlight sages warning about challenges of truth. These visions spoke of surrender, not encouragement. They offered an escape from hardship, not a path to healing. Her true grandmother would never ask her to abandon her purpose. With a surge of clarity, she saw the subtle darkness flickering at the edges of the forms, the hollow echo in their voices. "You are not real," she whispered, and the words were a shield. She focused all her will, drawing not on 1 crown, but on the unified power of all 5. The energy of earth, forest, stone, star, and sea coalesced into a single point of pure, blinding light at her chest. She did not attack the illusions, but instead released the light in a silent, expanding wave. It washed over the canyon, and the false images of her loved ones dissolved into nothingness with soft, sighing whispers, their deception unmasked. The true wraiths, revealed clinging to the shadows of the cliffs, recoiled from the radiance with silent fury. Alara knew this was not a victory, only a momentary reprieve. The light was already fading, and their numbers were endless. To stand and fight here, trapped in this stone corridor, would be to lose everything. The choice was clear and immediate. She turned and ran, her feet flying over the rocky ground, pushing toward the canyon's end, where the air shimmered with dry heat. The Wraith's chilling presence surged behind her, their frustration making the very air crackle. They were learning, adapting, and they would not be held back for long. She had to be faster. The call of the sixth crown was a faint, dry whisper on the wind, a promise of sanctuary in the vast, sun-scorched emptiness of the desert that now stretched out before her. The desert air was a dry furnace, and the sand shifted under Alara's feet with every weary step. This was the desert of shifting sands, a place where the horizon itself seemed to waver and lie. The pull of the sixth crown was a constant, faint tug in her mind, but her physical senses betrayed her at every turn. In the distance, a beautiful oasis would shimmer into view, its palm trees promising shade and its waters promising life, only to dissolve into empty, shimmering heat a moment later. Her throat was raw with thirst, her skin burned by the relentless sun, and the crowns on her head felt heavier than stone. Disorientation was a more dangerous enemy than any wraith, threatening to lead her in endless, desperate circles until her strength gave out. She had to stop trusting her eyes and learn to listen with her spirit. Closing her eyes against the blinding glare, she focused entirely on the harmonious hum of the five crowns, using their unified song as her only compass, a true north in a sea of illusions. It led her away from the grandest mirages and toward a smaller, less impressive flicker of green that seemed almost hesitant to appear. As she drew closer, this oasis did not vanish. It solidified into a single, ancient date palm, standing sentinel over a small, still pool of water. And there, beneath the tree, sat a being woven entirely of sand and air, its form constantly shifting, its eyes like ancient, polished stones. It was the sand spirit, the guardian of this place. It did not speak, but its meaning flowed directly into her mind. Many have seen the water. Few have proven they deserve to drink. Your need is great, but is your heart greater? Alara's own water skin was nearly empty, the last few sips a precious treasure she had been saving for her most difficult moment. This felt like that moment. Her own thirst was a screaming demand in her body, yet the spirit's silent presence was not one of greed, but of patient waiting, as if it had been waiting for centuries. Without a second thought, her decision was made. Her hands, cracked and dry, uncorked the skin, and she poured every last drop of her water into the oasis pool. The liquid vanished into the sand without a trace. For a terrifying second, she thought she had made a terrible, final mistake. Then, the pool began to glow with a soft, golden light. The sand spirit's form solidified, and a look of profound peace settled upon its features. It bowed its head, and from the heart of the now glowing pool, the sixth crown rose to the surface. It was a delicate band of intertwined gold and desert glass, and it held the warmth of the sun and the patience of the ages. As it took its place beside the others, the 6 crowns flared with a power that cooled the air around her and soothed her burning skin. The spirit's voice was a gentle rustle in her mind. You gave your last comfort to quench a thirst, not your own. You have passed the final test of the heart. But the spirit's form then began to fade, its energy spent. The oasis, too, started to shimmer, its reality thinning. The way is open to the final crown, it whispered, its voice growing distant. But the heat that guards it is not of this sun. It is the heat of a forge that tempered the world. Go quickly. With the spirit's fading warning, the protective coolness vanished. A new, deeper heat began to radiate from the earth itself, rising through the soles of her boots. The call of the 7th and final crown was suddenly clear, a sharp, metallic ring on the edge of her hearing, but it felt impossibly distant, separated by a landscape that now seemed to pulse with a hostile, primal energy. The 6 crowns hummed a song of near completion, yet the end of her journey felt farther away than ever. The spirit's final words hung in the air, a profound truth that settled deep within her. The shadow wraiths were not the true enemy, but only servants, echoes of a greater presence, waiting in a place where light had been forgotten, the fortress of final shadows. Its name alone carried a weight, a promise of a challenge far beyond anything she had yet faced. She looked at the 6 crowns on her head, their harmonious glow, a small, steady fire against the knowledge of that deep unknown. To fall short here was not a simple end to her journey. It was an unending quiet for all the realms. This was the choice that now defined her path, and with a breath that steadied her entire being, she accepted it. Her resolve did not flare like a torch, but hardened like cooled steel, quiet and unbreakable. As she turned from the fading oasis, a new light kindled in the sky above, a single, steady star that burned with the sand spirit's last strength. It cast a soft, silver beam upon the desert floor, painting a path through the shifting illusions. She followed without hesitation, the 6 crowns blazing with a unified light that pushed back the encroaching heat, their song a chorus of every trial she had overcome. The journey was no longer about finding a lost treasure, but about confronting the very source of the silence. Each step forward was a step toward a final meeting that would decide whether the fallen realms would remember their song or forget it forever beneath an enduring veil. The fortress of final shadows was not built of stone, but of solidified gloom. Its gates were 2 towering sheets of obsidian, seamless and impossibly high, covered in runes that seemed to writhe like trapped insects. As Alara approached, the 6 crowns on her head flared in response, their unified light casting a defiant glow against the oppressive darkness. The runes were a language of pure negation, each symbol a story of light extinguished and song silenced. She did not read them with her eyes, but felt their meaning through the crowns, a symphony of despair that threatened to overwhelm her. To open this gate required not force, but understanding. She had to answer its bleak story with one of hope. Focusing all her will, she channeled the crown's energy, weaving the memory of the forest's wisdom, the mountain's echo, the city's compassion, the sea's depth, and the desert's patience into a single, brilliant thread of light. She directed this thread toward the central rune, a symbol of an ended world. The gate did not shatter or swing open. It drank the light, the runes glowing with a painful, blinding whiteness, and then, with a sound like a great, weary sigh, the obsidian simply dissolved into a curtain of shimmering mist. The effort left her on her knees, gasping, the crowns dimmed to a faint ember glow. Her body felt hollow, her mind stretched thin. This was the price of such a profound act of creation in a place meant only for endings. Pushing herself to her feet, she looked into the absolute blackness beyond the gate. A final, chilling certainty settled over her. The path ahead was for her alone. No guide, no spirit, no sage could walk it with her. This was the last and most solitary step, a test not of her power, but of her independent will. Taking a steadying breath, she stepped through the mist. The air inside was frigid and still, devoid of scent or sound. And there, in the very center of that vast, lightless hall, she felt it. The presence of the seventh crown was not a warm call or a harmonious song. It was a cold, patient wait, an anchor in a sea of nothing, waiting for a keeper who could bear the final, absolute truth of the fallen realms. The air within the fortress was not merely cold, it was the absence of warmth, a stillness so profound it felt like a physical pressure against her skin. Before her stretched the hall of reflections, a corridor lined not with glass, but with pools of shimmering, liquid darkness that swirled into images as she passed. They were not simple mirrors, they were windows into what might be. One showed her standing triumphant, the 7 crowns blazing as the fallen realms bloomed with color and song, the people of Oakhaven cheering her name. Her heart swelled at the beautiful possibility. Another pool showed a different truth. It showed the crowns shattered, the realms forever locked in gray silence, and her own hands empty and still. The image was so vivid, so filled with a final, hollow quiet, that a sob caught in her throat. More and more pools flickered to life, each one a possible end. Some showed her turning back at the last moment, living a long life, shadowed by what she had almost achieved. Others showed the shadow wraiths, spilling into her village, a consequence she had fought so hard to prevent. The weight of every potential outcome pressed down on her, a heavy blanket of uncertainty. To focus on the happy endings was a tempting escape, but it was a distraction. To believe the difficult paths was to surrender before the fight had even begun. She understood the hall's true test. It was not a gallery of fate, but a maze of her own fears. With a cry that was part anguish and part determination, she raised her hands. Light, drawn from the deep well of the 6 crowns, burst forth in sharp, controlled beams. She did not aim for the visions of victory. She targeted the mirrors of hardship and setback, dissolving each one in a shower of fading darkness. Each mirror that broke released a wave of cold negation that drained her, leaching the warmth from her limbs and dimming the crown's glow. It was exhausting, soul-deep work, but with each dark reflection she released, the path ahead grew clearer, and the grip of uncertainty on her own spirit loosened. When the last troubling image faded into mist, she stood panting in the now empty hall, her body trembling with spent energy. The way forward was clear, a single archway leading into a chamber that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic darkness. She had passed through the gauntlet of her own doubt, but the true guardian of the 7th crown, the source of all this silence, was waiting. The rhythmic darkness in the chamber coalesced into a towering figure, a being woven from the sorrow of every failed keeper who had come before Alara. This was the guardian of shadows. Its voice was not a single sound, but a chorus of lost hopes and broken resolve. You stand where others fell. Why should you succeed where they found only despair? Prove your worthiness, or join the silence you seek to end. The demand was not angry, but heavy with the weight of centuries of failure. Alara felt the echoes of their uncertainty pressing in, a cool mist that sought to dim her own light. She could have listed her victories, described the 6 crowns blazing on her head, but that felt like pride, and pride had no place here. Instead, she made a simple choice. She would answer not with boasts, but with truth. She began to speak, her voice soft but clear in the vast chamber. She spoke of the fear in the whispering woods, and the choice to listen instead of flee. She recounted the moment at the crystal bridge, when she chose to mend what was broken instead of demanding passage. Her words painted pictures of her sacrifice in the desert, pouring out her last water, not for a reward, but because it was the right thing to do. I did not come for power, she said, her gaze steady on the shifting form before her. I came because the silence was a sorrow I could not ignore. My only hope is for the realms to remember their song. I want to see them healed. As she spoke from her heart, something remarkable happened. The guardian of shadows did not advance. It began to waver, its form rippling like a pond, disturbed by a single, pure stone. The chorus of lost voices within it softened, their anguish soothed by her sincerity. The darkness of the chamber seemed to thin, allowing a faint, gray light to penetrate the gloom. The guardian studied her, its multitude of eyes seeing not just her, but the truth of every selfless step she had taken. It saw the courage that was not an absence of fear, but the will to act despite it. It saw the compassion that had grown with every trial. You carry no shadow of greed, it murmured, its voice now a single, ancient whisper. Your heart is the key we have awaited. With a final, resonant sigh, the great being dissolved, not into nothingness, but into a soft, shimmering mist that faded away, its purpose fulfilled. Where it had stood, a simple throne of dark, smooth stone was revealed, and there, upon it, rested the 7th crown. It was the simplest of them all, a band of unadorned, polished iron that seemed to absorb the faint light, holding it deep within. It did not call to her with a song, but with a profound and steady quiet, the quiet of a promise finally kept. Her fingers were inches from the cool, dark iron of the final crown, when the air itself screamed. The shadow wraiths, held at bay by her earlier light, poured into the chamber from every crack and crevice. They did not attack her individually this time. Instead, they flowed together, a river of pure negation, converging before the throne, their countless forms twisting and merging into a single, colossal entity of utter darkness. It had no distinct shape, only a swirling, silent mass of concentrated despair, and its sole purpose was to claim the 7 crowns before she could complete the set. It moved toward her, not with speed, but with an inevitable, crushing finality. There was no time for thought, only for instinct and hope. With a final, desperate lunge, her hand closed around the 7th crown. The moment her skin touched the cool metal, she felt a jolt, not of power, but of absolute completion. She did not gently place it on her head. She shoved it into place beside the other 6. For one heartbeat, there was only silence. Then the world turned to light. The 7 crowns erupted. It was not an explosion of force, but a release of pure, harmonious energy, a symphony of color and sound made visible. The light poured from her, a wave of brilliant white shot through with the green of forests, the blue of seas, the gold of deserts, and the silver of stars. It struck the colossal shadow head-on. There was no violent collision, only a gentle, unstoppable push. The entity of darkness did not shatter. It simply unraveled, its form dissolving into harmless motes of fading gray that vanished into the now radiant air. The victory was absolute, but the cost was immense. Channeling that much power, the unified will of 7 fallen realms emptied Alara completely. It was as if the light had flowed through her, using her very spirit as its conduit, and in its passing, it had taken all her strength with it. Her legs gave way, her vision tunneling to a single point of light before fading to black. She collapsed to the stone floor as the fortress of final shadows, its foundational darkness now banished, began to tremble and groan around her. High above, cracks appeared in the ceiling, and fine dust rained down. Yet as she lay unconscious, the 7 crowns on her head did not dim. They hummed with a new, stable, and perfectly harmonious energy, their individual songs now one grand, quiet melody. The balance of power, held for so long in the favor of silence and shadow, had finally, decisively, shifted. The fortress fell, but the world rose. As Alara lay unconscious, the 7 crowns on her brow pulsed with a gentle, restorative energy, knitting her spirit back together. Her eyes fluttered open to a sight that stole her breath. Where once there had been only the oppressive gloom of the fortress, a vibrant, living landscape was unfolding. Ruins rebuilt themselves, not with the noise of labor, but with the quiet grace of remembering, stone sliding upon stone, as if guided by an invisible hand. Faded magic returned to the air, a shimmering tapestry of color and light that made the very breeze feel alive, and through it all came the whispers, not of fear or judgment, but of profound gratitude from the ancient kingdoms, a chorus of relief from realms thought lost forever. Yet this beautiful resurgence was not a quiet one. The massive outpouring of energy was a beacon in the quiet of the universe, a ringing bell that could not be ignored. Deep in the void between realms, in a place where light had never reached, something ancient and cold shifted in its slumber. It was the original silence, the source from which the shadow wraiths had been born, and it had felt the disturbance. Alara felt its attention like a sudden drop in temperature, a primal chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The crowns hummed a warning, their harmonious song now tinged with a new urgency. The quest to unite them was over, but her purpose was transformed. She now faced a choice that would define the future of every realm. Would she hide the crowns, scattering their light to keep them safe from this awakened presence, hoping it would return to its rest? Or would she gather their unified power and journey to confront the source itself, a being of such immense negation that the wraiths were merely its echoes? The weight of the realms was no longer an abstract idea. It was a physical pressure on her soul. The gratitude of the ancient kingdoms was a beautiful song, but it was also a plea, and the decision of how to answer it was hers alone to make. The journey home felt like walking through a dream. The familiar path to Oakhaven was now lined with flowers that pulsed with a soft, golden light, and the very air hummed with a gentle energy that had not been there before. As Alara crested the final hill, her heart swelled at the sight below. Her village was still there, but it was transformed. A soft, shimmering barrier of light, like a dome of woven starlight, arched over the cottages. Vines glowing with silver sap climbed the walls, and the village well water now sparkled with tiny, dancing motes of magic. The people were gathered in the square, their faces a mixture of awe and concern, and at their front stood her mother and grandmother, their eyes wide with a recognition that went beyond simple surprise. Alara's steps were heavy with a weariness that sleep could not cure, a deep fatigue born of carrying the fate of kingdoms. She approached her family not as a conquering hero, but as a daughter returning from a conflict they never knew was being fought. The 7 crowns on her head were quiet now, their light a steady, warm presence rather than a blazing fire. She told them everything. She spoke of the whispering woods and the echoing stones, of the crystal city and the sunken grotto. She did not hide the fear or the moments of doubt, and she spoke of the shadows not as monsters to be hated, but as a force of silence that needed to be answered with light. Her grandmother simply nodded, a single tear tracing a path through the wrinkles of her wise face, as if she had been waiting her whole life to hear this story. Seeing the protective light over the village and the new magic blooming in their gardens, Alara understood a fundamental truth. She could not keep this power for herself. The crowns had chosen her, but their purpose was to protect all life. She made a conscious choice. She began to teach the villagers how to channel the residual energy the crowns had left in the soil, the water, and the air. She showed them how to focus their collective will to strengthen the light barrier, how to listen for the subtle shifts in the magic that might signal an approaching unease. It was not about making them warriors, but about making them guardians. They learned to work together, their shared intention weaving a stronger, more resilient protection around their home. Oakhaven was no longer just a village. It was a sanctuary, a place where ancient magic and human spirit had intertwined. This newfound strength, however, came with a profound vulnerability. The brilliant, unified light of their community, a direct echo of the 7 crowns, was a beacon in the spiritual landscape. It shone like a lone star in a vast, dark sky, visible to any being that still thirsted for that light or sought to diminish it. They had traded the danger of one girl's quest for the shared responsibility of a community's watchfulness. The peace they cultivated was beautiful, but it was not the simple peace of before. It was a watchful peace, a conscious choice made every sunrise, a quiet understanding that the balance they now enjoyed was a precious thing, and that its preservation required their unwavering care. The soft glow of the village barrier was a comfort, but it could not quiet the questions gathering in Alara's mind like storm clouds. She requested a meeting with the village elders, a solemn gathering held in the lantern, lit quiet of the longhouse. Before their weathered, concerned faces, she laid bare the entire story. She spoke of the fortress of final shadows and the entity she had encountered, and then, her voice dropping, she told them of the deeper chill she had felt afterward, the ancient presence stirring in the void. A heavy silence filled the room. The choice before them was stark. Do we raise our walls higher? One elder asked, and trust our own light to be enough? Or do we reach out? Another countered, and risk drawing the attention of this new presence before we are ready. The debate stretched into the night, a delicate balance between the safety of isolation and the strength of unity. Alara listened to every voice, her fingers resting on the cool metal of the crowns. She knew that a sanctuary, no matter how bright, could become a cage if it stood alone. Her decision, when it came, was clear. We will not hide, she said. We will seek guidance from those who understand the nature of this balance. Under the cover of a moonless night, the first envoys departed. One carried a message woven from starlight and memory toward the city of crystal spires, for the wisdom of the starlight sages. Another, bearing a vessel of water from their enchanted well, and a map drawn on sandstone, set out for the desert of shifting sands to find the patient sand spirit. It was an act of profound trust, the first threads of a new alliance being spun between realms that had been silent for an age. As the envoys vanished into the darkness, a new kind of watchfulness settled over Oakhaven. Every rustle in the magical perimeter was noted, every shift in the wind analyzed. They had opened a dialogue of hope, but in a world where shadows had once held sway, every whispered word of unity could also be heard by those who preferred the silence. The paths the envoys walked were no longer the desolate trails of old. Where barren earth had lain, soft grasses now grew, shimmering with dew that caught the morning light like scattered jewels. Yet this new life was fragile. Strange, twisted creatures, remnants of the shadow Wraiths' presence, still lingered in the deeper thickets. They were not intelligent hunters, but more like echoes of old malice, drawn to any spark of light. The envoys carried with them small, smooth stones that Alara had imbued with a fraction of the crown's power. When one of these shadowy forms, a skittering thing of gloom and sharp angles, lunged from a gully, the lead envoy held up her light charm. The stone flared, not with a blinding flash, but with a steady, purifying glow that made the creature recoil and fade into harmless mist. Each use, however, dimmed the charm slightly, a quiet reminder that their protection was finite. Their safe arrival at the foot of the crystal bridge was a moment of profound relief. The starlight sages awaited them, their faces no longer weary, but alight with a cautious hope. The message from Oakhaven was received not as a plea, but as an invitation. The sages agreed without hesitation. A grand council of the realms must be convened, they said, for a light that stands alone is a beacon, but a network of lights is a new dawn. When this news traveled back to Alara, carried by a sage's messenger who moved on beams of starlight, it felt like the first true warmth after a long winter. She watched the villagers practicing with their shared magic, weaving strands of light into a stronger shield, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe in a future of united strength. But that night, as she looked toward the stars, the 7 crowns on her head hummed a low, cautionary note. The darkness was not gone. It was learning, adapting, and biding its time, gathering its strength for a challenge that would test their newfound alliance before it even truly began. The first envoy from the Whispering Woods arrived not with a fanfare, but with the quiet rustle of leaves, a figure whose form seemed woven from dappled sunlight and ancient bark. Soon after, a shimmering presence from the city of crystal spires materialized in the village square, and a being of shifting sand stepped silently from the desert wind. Oakhaven, once a simple village, was now host to a gathering of realms thought lost to legend. The air hummed with a dozen different magics, a symphony of power that was both beautiful and dangerously discordant. The guardian from the woods spoke of the need to fortify the natural world, to let the forests grow thick and impassable as a defense. The starlight sage argued for a shield of pure, refined energy, a barrier of thought and light. The sand spirit communicated through feelings of immense patience, a strategy of waiting and enduring the coming storm. Alara stood at the center, the 7 crowns a quiet, calming weight on her brow. She did not command or choose a side. Instead, she listened, truly listened, to the heart of each argument. The crowns allowed her to feel the wood's deep-rooted concern, the city's intellectual precision, and the desert's timeless perspective. "Your wisdom is not in conflict," she said, her voice clear and steady. "It is a tapestry. Let the forests be our first, living wall. Let the crystal spires provide the focus for our shared light. And let the desert's patience be the foundation that holds us steady when the challenge feels endless." Her words, drawn from the unified wisdom she carried, did not force a compromise, but revealed a deeper harmony. The representatives fell silent, then nodded in agreement, a united front, solidifying not through force, but through understood purpose. They agreed to share scouts, to weave their magics, to become a single entity, facing the uncertainty. Yet as the pact was sealed, a breathless scout stumbled into the longhouse, his face pale. "The shadows near the fallen fortress are no longer lingering," he reported. "They are gathering, taking shape. They are marching." The first sentinel's warning cry was a sharp crack in the peaceful dawn. From the edge of the whispering woods, the shadows were no longer shifting. They were marching, a tide of solidified darkness, moving with a chilling, unified purpose. At their head strode a figure of terrible clarity, a wraith commander whose form was not mere gloom, but a lattice of obsidian and frozen starlight, brought forth with a cold intelligence that its lesser kin had lacked. Alara's heart hammered not with panic, but with a grim focus. The Council's alliance was about to face its first trial. She stood on the newly raised earthen rampart, the 7 crowns humming against her brow, and began to direct the defense. Light wielders from the Crystal City, their hands glowing with concentrated energy, took positions beside warriors from the woods who carried bows of living wood and arrows tipped with searing light. Alara did not command them to attack, but to hold, to form a living, breathing wall of resistance. As the shadow tide crashed against their front line, she raised her hands, and the crowns answered. A massive, shimmering dome of golden light erupted from her, arching over the entire village. It was not a solid wall, but a living barrier that thickened where the assault was fiercest, a shield woven from the combined hope of every realm. The Wraith commander watched, its hollow eyes analyzing the flow of energy. It did not simply throw its forces against the light. It learned. When the light wielders focused their beams, the commander redirected its troops to strike the momentarily weakened sections of the barrier. When the forest archers loosed their volleys, the shadows would dissipate and reform just beyond their range, testing the limits of their endurance. Alara had to constantly shift the barrier's density, a mental dance that left her breathless and drained. Her strategic choices preserved the community that day, turning a potential tragedy into a hard-fought defense. Yet as the Shadow Army finally receded, melting back into the tree line, a cold realization settled over the defenders. They had held the line, but the darkness had not been blindly violent. It had been studying them, probing for weaknesses, learning the rhythm of their combined strength. The need for a mere defense was over. The battle had revealed an unsettling truth, that their enemy was evolving, and a permanent solution was now a matter of survival. The War Council fell into a heavy silence after the last scout's report. A simple defense would no longer be enough. Alara stood, the 7 crowns on her head, glowing with a soft, steady light. that seemed to calm the anxious murmurs in the room. "We cannot spend our strength fighting an endless tide," she said, her voice clear and calm. "The darkness has a source, and we must seal it." Her plan was both simple and profound. She proposed to use the unified power of the crowns, not to destroy, but to contain, to weave a lasting seal of light over the heart of the fortress of final shadows, securing the emerging presence away at its origin. The ritual's success, she explained, hinged on a rare celestial event, the next lunar alignment, when the veil between light and shadow would be at its thinnest, allowing their magic to take root in the very foundation of the fortress. It was a mission of immense risk, a direct journey into the enemy's strongest territory. Failure would not just mean their own end. It would mean delivering the 7 crowns directly into the hands of the very force they sought to restrain, ensuring the fall of every realm. Alara did not ask for an army. She asked for a team. She chose a handful of her most trusted companions, each representing a realm whose magic now lived within the crowns. From the Whispering Woods came a silent, keen-eyed archer who could hear the shift of a leaf on the wind. From the city of crystal spires came a light weaver whose focus could shape pure energy into solid form. From the desert of shifting sands came a resilient guide who could find a path through any illusion. Their selection was a testament to the alliance they had built, a small, potent force embodying their collective strength. Preparations began at once, a quiet, focused flurry of activity. The light weavers practiced channeling their energy into a single, sustained beam. The scouts studied every map and account of the fortress interior. Alara herself spent hours in meditation, feeling the 7 distinct powers within the crowns, learning to hold them in perfect, balanced harmony, a symphony of magic that would have to hold firm against an ocean of nothingness. The fate of their world now rested on the success of a single, determined journey into the deepest dark. The journey back was a walk through a world reborn. Where Alara had once struggled across a sun-scorched desert, a lush green valley now sprawled, its floor carpeted with flowers that chimed softly in the breeze. A river of crystalline water, pulsing with a faint blue light, cut through hills that were once barren stone. This was the magic of the crowns made manifest, a beautiful and bewildering new geography. Their path was no longer a memory, but a constant act of rediscovery. To move unseen, Alara learned to draw upon the crowns not as a beacon, but as a cloak. She wove a subtle field of misdirection around their small group, bending light and sound so that they passed like whispers through the vibrant undergrowth. It was a delicate balance, using such immense power to achieve near invisibility, and the constant effort was a quiet drain on her spirit. The very wonders they were protecting now became the landscape of their stealth. One misstep, one snapped branch, could betray them to the patrols of solidified shadow that now roamed the renewed lands with a chilling purpose. It was in the dappled light of the newborn forest that their concealment was tested. A shadow scout, its form a jagged silhouette against the glowing foliage, paused mere feet from their hidden position. It did not see them, but it sensed a dissonance, a pocket of silence within the forest song. It turned its hollow gaze toward the space they occupied, drifting closer. The archer from the woods knocked an arrow of searing light, but Alara gave a sharp, silent shake of her head. A fight would bring the entire patrol down upon them. Instead, She pushed her will into the crowns, thickening the veil of misdirection until the very air around them seemed to warp and swim. The scout hesitated, confused, then moved on, its attention caught by a distant chime of magic. The encounter was too close. They could not risk the main paths any longer. Forced into a detour, the guide from the desert led them into a network of caverns that wound through the mountains. These were not the welcoming, echoing halls of stone Alara remembered, but tight, dark passages where the new magic had not yet reached. The air was cold and still, and the only light came from the faint glow of the crowns and the focused beam of the light weaver. In the oppressive silence, every shuffle of their feet echoed like a proclamation, and the weight of the mountain above them felt like the gaze of the enemy itself. Their resolve was tested not by monsters, but by the relentless, pressing dark and the gnawing fear that they were walking into a trap. When they finally emerged from the cavern far end, the sight that greeted them stole any relief they might have felt. There, in a valley of twisted, petrified trees that even the returning magic could not heal, stood the fortress of Final Shadows. It was darker and more foreboding than before, its obsidian walls seeming to drink the light from the very sky, a stark wound in the heart of the reborn world. The fortress loomed like a black hole, its obsidian walls seeming to pull the very starlight from the sky. High above, the moon began its slow, celestial dance into alignment, a sliver of silver against the deepening gloom. Alara and her companions moved into their prearranged positions, forming a wide circle around the structure's base. The archer from the woods nocked an arrow that glowed with captured dawn. The light weaver from the city held a crystal that pulsed with a steady, brilliant beam. The desert guide stood firm, a vessel of shimmering sand in their hands, each grain humming with patient resolve. Each focus was a conduit, a piece of the greater whole, all linked to the 7 crowns resting on Alara's brow. She stood at the center of their circle, directly before the fortress gate, and closed her eyes. Drawing a deep breath, she reached for the crowns, not as separate powers, but as a single, unified river of light. The energy flowed into her, a symphony of forest wisdom, mountain echo, starlight compassion, sea depth, and desert patience, all harmonizing into one immense, focused intention. She began to weave. Her hands moved as if pulling threads from the air itself, each motion drawing a strand of pure, golden light from the crowns. These threads stretched out to her companions, connecting their focuses into a single, shimmering net of energy that began to rise and expand, slowly encasing the fortress in a cage of living radiance. For a moment, it seemed to be working. The fortress's oppressive aura visibly recoiled from the advancing light. Then, the darkness fought back. It did not strike with physical force, but with a psychic assault tailored to each of them. The archer suddenly saw the whispering woods withering back into gray silence. The light weaver felt his crystal shatter in his mind's eye, his power extinguished forever. The desert guide was plunged into a vision of an endless, waterless dune under a black sun. Waves of pure fear and corrosive doubt crashed against their concentration, threatening to snap the delicate threads of light. Alara felt it all, the collective despair of her friends amplified and reflected back at her. A chilling voice, woven from her own deepest fears, whispered in her mind. You are a child playing with forces you cannot control. You will fail them all. Your hope is a lie. Her hands trembled, the brilliant net faltering, but then she remembered. She remembered the choice to mend the crystal bridge, the feel of the cool sea crown in her hand, the taste of her last water given freely. She felt the steady, silent support of her allies, each one fighting their own internal battle to hold the line. Her hope was not a solitary flame, but a bonfire built from every act of courage on her journey. She anchored herself in that certainty, and her resolve hardened into something unbreakable. The faltering threads of light flared brighter than ever, the net drawing tighter, its weave becoming impossibly dense and strong as she poured the entirety of her will into the final phase of the sealing. The darkness did not simply watch its prison being built. It lashed out, gathering its scattered essence from every corner of the fortress and drawing it into one final, overwhelming shape. A towering figure of void and sorrow rose before Alara, a being whose very presence seemed to deny all light, all hope, all song. It did not strike at her with force, but with a voice that echoed deep within her soul, a chorus of every doubt she had ever carried. "You could rule this silence," it whispered, its words like splinters of ice. "The power in the crowns could make you queen of all you see. No one would ever command you again. You would never feel weak or afraid. Stand with me and be forever set apart from the ache of caring for others." The temptation was a cold, insistent pull. For a fleeting moment, she saw the vision it offered, a throne of absolute power where no one could ever wound her or make her feel small again. But then, a warmer, brighter memory surfaced. She remembered the quiet, understanding in the archer's eyes as they stood together, the selfless focus of the light weaver pouring his energy into the net, the steady patience of the desert guide. She remembered her grandmother's hand on her shoulder and the shared hope in the eyes of her village. These were not chains. They were the very source of her strength. Her answer was not a shout of defiance, but a quiet, inward certainty. "I am not alone, and I do not want a crown of isolation. I choose the light we share." With that final, selfless refusal of its offer, she focused the entire, unified power of the 7 crowns. The swirling energies of earth, forest, stone, star, sea, and desert wove together into one single, piercing beam of pure white radiance. It was not a weapon of destruction, but of absolute truth, a lance of condensed hope that met the heart of the sorrowful being. The towering form did not shatter. It simply came apart, its essence fading into a soft sigh, carried away on a sudden, warm wind. Freed from the core's resistance, the great net of light drifted down, settling over the fortress like a gentle, final covering. The obsidian stone itself began to glow from within, transforming into a dome of eternal, peaceful light, a lasting seal and a tribute to their triumph. As the last of the light settled, the immense energy that had flowed through Alara came to an end. The crowns on her head softened to a steady, quiet gleam, their great task complete. Her legs gave way, and she sank to her knees, not in defeat, but in total weariness, the cost of channeling such profound magic, leaving her spirit feeling thin and spent. The struggle was over, the shadow contained, but the keeper who had made it possible now knelt in the stillness, her own light burning low. The world breathed a sigh of relief. Where the fortress of final shadows had once cast its long gloom, a garden of luminous crystal now bloomed, its gentle light a permanent ward against the old silence. Across the realms, Magic did not just return, it thrived, weaving itself into the fabric of daily life. The whispering woods hummed with brighter songs, the city of crystal spires shone with renewed brilliance, and the desert of shifting sands bloomed with resilient, glowing flora. Kingdoms rebuilt not as isolated fortresses, but as interconnected allies, their borders open, their people sharing knowledge and resources in a web of mutual support, forged in the fires of their shared struggle. Alara, of course, was at the heart of it all. They called her the keeper of the realms, the star-crowned, the girl who mended the world, yet the adulation felt like a garment that did not quite fit. The true weight was not the praise, but the quiet question that followed her every waking moment. What now? The 7 crowns were no longer separate objects she could remove. They had fused with her spirit, their light a permanent part of her being, a gentle, constant presence at the edge of her awareness. She could have used this bond to claim a throne, to rule as an unchallenged monarch over the grateful kingdoms. The temptation of such effortless authority was a quiet whisper in a moment of weariness, but she remembered the cold promise of the final shadow, the empty throne of isolation it had offered. That was not the strength she had fought for. Her choice was a reflection of the journey itself. She would keep the crowns, but she would redefine their purpose. They would not be symbols of dominion over others, but tools for guidance and protection. They became her way of listening to the subtle needs of the land, of sensing a dissonance in the magic of a distant realm before it became a crisis, of gently encouraging growth and understanding between different peoples. She became a living bridge, a wise guardian who used the light not to command, but to counsel. The curious child from Oakhaven was gone, transformed by experience and dedication into a steady, compassionate presence. Her home was still the village, but her duty was to all the fallen realms, ensuring that the hard-won peace was not a fleeting moment, but a lasting legacy nurtured by the very same light that had restored it. Oakhaven's central square was a tapestry of color and sound, woven from the gathered peoples of every realm. Under a sky filled with drifting, enchanted lights, the grand ceremony began. It was not a coronation of old, with a single throne and a heavy scepter, but something far more profound. Leaders from the whispering woods, the crystal spires, and the desert of shifting sands stood together, their hands united not in force, but in offering. They presented Alara with a simple, woven circlet of living silverwood and starlight crystal, naming her the keeper of the crowns. This was not a title of command, but a sacred trust. Her voice was soft yet clear as she accepted, her pledge echoing the very purpose of her long journey. I will walk the paths between our homes, she vowed, to help them grow strong and to stand watch so the quiet never finds its way back. The celebration that followed was a symphony of pure joy, a release of tension held for generations. Yet as laughter and music swirled around her, Alara felt a quiet anchor of responsibility settled deep within her spirit. The 7 crowns hummed in gentle agreement against her brow, a constant reminder that the most difficult work often begins after the challenge is past. True peace was not a final state to be achieved, but a living garden that required daily tending, and her watchfulness was the water that would sustain it. Her first journey as keeper began with a simple request carried on the wind, a faint whisper of concern from the oldest trees in the whispering woods. Alara traveled not with a royal procession, but with a small, quiet company of guides, the 7 crowns on her head, a soft, guiding star in the dappled forest light. The celebration in Oak Haven felt a world away as they reached the quiet lands. Here, the vibrant greens and golds of the renewed forest gave way to patches of gray, brittle earth where the shadows had lingered the longest. The very air was thin and still, the trees standing like solemn witnesses to a time of difficulty. The forest guardians awaited her, their forms of woven light and bark seeming subdued, their ancient eyes holding a deep, quiet reflection. "We have nurtured all we can," one guardian murmured, its voice like the rustle of dry leaves, "but this quietness goes deep. The earth here does not remember how to sing." Alara knelt, placing her hands upon the cool, gray soil. She did not force the light of the crowns upon it. Instead, she closed her eyes and listened, using the crowns as a bridge to feel the land's own, fading memory of life. She remembered the lesson of the crystal bridge, that true restoration was not an act of domination, but of encouragement. Gently, she let a trickle of the unified light flow from her, not as a brilliant blast, but as a slow, warm seep into the ground, like water finding its way to parched roots. She poured into the soil the memory of the sun's warmth, the resilience of the desert, and the enduring patience of stone. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a single, brave blade of grass, glowing with a faint silver light, pushed through the cracked earth. Then another, and another, until the gray was overtaken by a shimmering carpet of new life. The brittle trees began to sigh, their bark softening and turning rich brown, their branches sprouting leaves that chimed softly like tiny bells. The silence was broken not by a roar, but by a rising, gentle hum as the forest song returned to the once quiet land. The guardians watched, their solemnity replaced by a profound, wordless gratitude. In return for this gift of life, they did not offer gold or titles. They offered knowledge. As night fell, they led Alara to a hidden grove where the trees themselves were the keepers of stories. They taught her to listen to the deeper songs of the world, the ancient melodies that predated even the crowns, the fundamental harmonies of growth, transition, and renewal. They showed her how the light she carried could be woven into these older patterns, not to command nature, but to collaborate with it. This exchange, a healing given and a deeper wisdom received, became the model for all her travels. Each realm held unique knowledge, a piece of the world's grand story, and as keeper, her role was to learn as much as she taught. The success in the Whispering Woods sent a ripple of confidence through the allied realms. It proved that their unity was not just for protection, but for a shared, flourishing future. Yet with every new lesson learned and every new bond forged, Alara also understood that each land would present its own unique puzzles, its own quiet struggles that required not just power, but a listening heart and an adaptable spirit. The first graduates of her training stood before her, their faces a mixture of youthful hope and solemn purpose. Alara looked at them not as students, but as the living answer to a question that had haunted her since the fortress fell. Could the light survive if she were not there to hold it? She had chosen each one not for raw power, but for a quality she could feel in their spirit, a deep-seated empathy that shone brighter than any spell. A young woman from the crystal spires who had spent her youth mending fractured light weaves, a quiet man from the Whispering Woods who could calm a frightened animal with a single gentle touch. They were weavers, healers, and listeners, and they were now the first of the new guardians. Her teaching was not about grand displays of force. She gathered them in the very places where the realm's magic was strongest, in sun-dappled groves and beside singing streams. She taught them to listen, to feel for the subtle harmonies in the world around them. "Can you feel the steady patience in this ancient stone?" she would ask. "Can you hear the resilient joy in this desert bloom?" She showed them how to draw upon the residual energy the crowns had left woven into the land, a gentle echo of the greater light she carried. They learned to channel this energy not as a weapon, but as a tool for mending and strengthening, to reinforce a faltering barrier or soothe a troubled patch of land. Their power was a quiet chorus compared to her symphony, but it was a chorus that could now sing from many places at once. This network of guardians changed the very nature of protection for the allied realms. It was no longer a single, central flame that all others huddled around for safety. It became a constellation of steady lights, each one a beacon of hope for their own community and a point of connection to the whole. If a whisper of the old silence stirred near the desert, the guardian there could feel it and send a pulse of awareness through the network, allowing help to arrive before a challenge could even form. The weight was no longer a burden for one set of shoulders, but a shared responsibility carried by many hearts. As Alara watched her first graduates take their vows, she saw not the end of her own duty, but the beautiful, resilient beginning of a legacy that could truly endure. Sleep found Alara under a canopy of stars, and with it came a dream of breathtaking clarity. She stood in a vast open hall where sunlight streamed through crystalline arches, and 7 thrones stood not in a line of authority, but in a circle of equals. Upon them sat the original bearers of the crowns, their faces not stern with power, but alight with shared purpose. The woman wearing the crown of the forest leaned close to the man bearing the desert's circlet, her hand resting on a sapling that grew from a handful of sand he offered. Another, crowned with starlight, laughed with the one who held the sea's pearl, their joy creating tiny, shimmering rainbows in the air. They were not ruling, they were weaving, each thread of their unique magic, strengthening a tapestry of collective well-being. There were no commands, only conversations, a symphony of cooperation where every note was essential. In that moment, Alara understood the profound difference between power held over others and power shared with them. She awoke not with a start, but with a deep, resonating calm, the memory of that perfect harmony etched upon her soul. Her purpose, once focused on defense and protection, now crystallized into something more beautiful and enduring. Her role was not to be the sole source of light, but to be the loom on which the realms could weave themselves back together. The dream was not a mere memory, it was a blueprint. Rising in the soft pre-dawn light, she took out a blank journal and began to write. She recorded not just the images, but the feeling of the hall, the unspoken trust between the bearers, the way their combined energies created something far greater than the sum of their parts. This would be her guide, a testament for future keepers that true strength is found in unity, forged through compassion and mutual respect. That dream vision became the quiet heartbeat of all her efforts, a constant reminder that the most powerful magic was not in the crowns themselves, but in the connections they were always meant to symbolize. Years flowed like a gentle river, and Alara's name was whispered not just in royal courts, but in cozy cottages at dusk. Her journey from a curious girl to the keeper of the realms became the bedrock of new legends, stories told to wide-eyed children who would trace the seven-pointed star on their blankets and dream of their own adventures. Yet Alara knew that stories, when passed only by word of mouth, could fade or twist with time. Memory needed a home, and so, in the heart of Oakhaven, she helped build a library unlike any other. It was not a silent, dusty place for old scrolls, but a living, breathing heart of knowledge. Its walls were woven from the living roots of the whispering woods. Its windows were panes of crystal from the spires, and light was provided by softly glowing orbs gifted by the sand spirits. Here, the entire epic was preserved, the history of the crowns and the realms carefully recorded by scribes from every kingdom. The tale of the shadow wraiths was written not to frighten, but to teach the value of vigilance and the strength found in light. Her own story was inscribed there with simple honesty, a testament that the greatest power often begins not with a shout, but with a single, quiet choice to care for something beyond oneself. This library became a destination for scholars and seekers, a place to understand that the peace they enjoyed was not an accident, but a legacy forged through courage and cooperation. Under the steady, gentle guidance of this shared history, the realms entered an era of prosperity that felt almost like a dream. Trade routes bloomed where barren paths had been, and festivals of light and music were held in the great squares of every kingdom, celebrating their interconnected lives. This was the true legacy of the crowns, not etched in stone or metal, but woven into the very fabric of a world that had chosen to remember its song. The stars above the luminous garden were old friends, their light a quiet echo of the seven crowns resting against her silver-streaked hair. Alara stood at the edge of the sealed fortress, her hand resting on the warm, smooth crystal that had once been a gate of sorrow. The gentle hum against her brow was a constant companion, a conversation between her spirit and the realms she had helped to heal. She felt the steady, rhythmic pulse of the light seal deep within the earth, a testament to their shared victory, yet she knew this was not an end. True peace was not a final destination, but a living river that required constant care. Watchfulness was the price of this beautiful silence, a duty that would never truly be finished. She thought of the new guardians now scattered across the lands, each one a budding light she had nurtured. They were weavers, healers, and listeners, and in their capable hands, she saw the future unfolding. The knowledge that they would rise when called, that the song of the realms would continue long after her own voice had become part of memory, was the deepest comfort of all. It was a cycle as ancient as the stars themselves, a promise written in light that the realms would never truly falter again, for their strength was no longer in one crown or one keeper, but in the countless hearts that now beat in harmony. The path back to Oakhaven was no longer a secret trail, but a well-trodden road of peace, lined with lanterns that glowed with the shared light of the allied realms. As Alara walked into the village square at dusk, a group of children broke from their games and rushed to greet her, their small faces upturned and filled with a familiar, wondrous light. They knew the legends, of course, but they wanted to hear the story from the keeper herself. She settled on a low stone bench beneath the great oak, and as the first stars pricked the evening sky, she began to speak. Her voice was soft, weaving a tale not of terrifying monsters, but of quiet courage, of a choice to listen in the woods and a choice to pour out the last precious drops of water in the desert. She spoke of the crowns not as weapons of immense power, but as symbols of trust between realms. The children listened, utterly captivated, and in their wide, hopeful eyes, Alara saw her own reflection from so long ago, that same spark of curiosity that had led her to open her grandmother's chest. She understood then that the true legacy was never locked in the metal and gems of the crowns, which now rested as a part of her own spirit. It lived here, in the hearts of the next generation, in every child who heard the story and felt that quiet pull toward kindness and bravery. The tale of the 7 crowns would become a bedtime story, passed from parent to child, a reminder that the greatest adventures often begin with a simple, selfless choice. That night, as the realms slept under a blanket of starlight, their dreams were not of fear or silence, but of a future forever woven together by threads of shared hope and enduring unity.